Hey, Mike here. I just wanted to let you know that you can listen to Dark Poutine early and ad-free on Amazon Music, included with Prime.
Welcome back to Dark Poutine. I am Mike Brown.
And I am Matthew Stockton.
You are. How are things this week, Matthew?
I'm feeling good today, Mike.
You're feeling good. That's good. That's good.
I'm feeling good today. It's been a long road, but I'm feeling good, and you know, a little bit of pain. Like a friend of mine, when I told her what my surgery was like, she's like, "So it's like you had 5 cesareans across your abdomen."
Yeah, right.
So that was painful, but I'm feeling good and positive today.
That's a good thing.
Yeah, let's get into it.
The views, information, and opinions expressed during the Dark Poutine podcast are solely those of the producer and do not necessarily represent those of Curious Cast, its affiliate, Global News, nor their parent company, Chorus Entertainment.
Dark Poutine is not for the faint of heart or squeamish. Listener discretion is strongly advised. We're not experts on the topics we present, nor are we journalists. We're two ordinary Canadian schmucks chatting about crime and the dark side of history. Let's get to it. Put on your toque, grab yourself a double and a Nanaimo bar. It's time to scarf down some Dark Poutine.
You are responsible for obtaining and maintaining at your own cost all equipment needed to listen to Dark Poutine. Dark Poutine can be addictive. Side effects may include, but not be limited to, pausing and questioning the system, elevated heart rate, pondering humanity, odd looks from colleagues as you laugh out loud at work, family members not into true crime worrying about you. Positive side effects may include some perspectives and opinions that you disagree with, as well as some wokeness and empathy. If you don't think Dark Poutine is for you, consult your doctor immediately.
In this episode, we're exploring a phenomenon that blurs the line between consciousness and culpability, homicidal somnambulism. Can a person be held responsible for murder if they commit the act while sleepwalking? We'll examine 2 haunting cases that have grappled with this very question. First, we'll unravel the infamous story of Kenneth Parks, who in 1987 drove 23 kilometres from his home in Pickering to Scarborough, Ontario, where he brutally attacked his in-laws Dennis and Barbara Woods, killing his mother-in-law. Then we'll turn our attention to the lesser-known case of Clayton John Vickberg, who attempted to kill his friend Hugh Heglin in Victoria, BC in 1996 while allegedly in a state of automatism. These cases challenge our understanding of criminal intent and raise unsettling questions about the nature of consciousness itself. This is Dark Poutine episode 355, Homicidal Somnambulism. Are you a murderer if you kill in your sleep? As someone who suffers from sleep apnea, I have a real fascination with sleep dreams and parasomnias. Parasomnia is a fascinating category of sleep disorders that encompasses a wide range of unusual behaviors, experiences, and phenomena occurring during sleep or in the transitions between sleep stages. These disorders can manifest in various ways, often perplexing individuals and their loved ones with strange nocturnal activities. Night terrors typically affect children and involve sudden awakenings accompanied by intense fear, screaming, and physical agitation. These episodes can be highly distressing for both the child and their parents, often leaving no memory of the event come morning, thankfully. Confusional arousals, on the other hand, are characterized by disoriented behavior upon waking, with individuals appearing confused and unresponsive to their surroundings. This is why you don't wake someone up while they're sleepwalking. REM sleep behavior disorder is a particularly intriguing parasomnia where the natural paralysis that occurs during REM sleep is absent, This allows individuals to physically act out their dreams, sometimes resulting in vigorous and potentially dangerous movements. In a similar vein, sleep-related eating disorder involves unconscious eating during the night, often without any recollection of the behavior in the morning. Sexsomnia, a lesser-known parasomnia, involves engaging in sexual behaviors during sleep, ranging from simple fondling to full sexual intercourse. This can be particularly distressing for both the individual and their partner, as the behavior occurs without conscious awareness or consent.
Okay, so I can attest to this. I have done this 3 times.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Luckily, and this is actually why I don't sleep with people that I wouldn't be willing to have sex with. It was 3 times across 2 different boyfriends we were living together and were totally up for it. They didn't realize I was asleep when I started it, but I wake up in the middle of sex. I've done that 3 times.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's weird. It's really weird.
Yeah, no kidding. Sleep paralysis is a terrifying experience where individuals find themselves unable to move or speak upon waking or falling asleep, often accompanied by a sense of pressure on the chest and vivid hallucinations. Exploding head syndrome, despite its alarming name, is a benign condition where people experience loud imagery, noises, or a sensation of explosion in their heads as they transition in or out of sleep. I've had this. Lastly, sleep-related hallucinations can occur at the onset of sleep, hypnagogic, or upon waking, hypnopompic, involving vivid and often frightening sensory experiences that feel incredibly real to the individual experiencing them. Sleep talking, or somniloquy, is a common parasomnia when people vocalize during sleep, ranging from incomprehensible mumbles to coherent conversations. I have done this many times.
According to my husband, I do it almost every night.
Oh, well, according to your husband, I don't know if he knows whether or not I do it, but...
Oh! Where were you last night, Justin? Nowhere.
Nowhere? Yeah, that's pretty common. It's very common for people to mumble and say things in their sleep. I know I've had crazy conversations in my sleep. So one of the most well-known and intriguing parasomnias is somnambulism, commonly known as sleepwalking, which involves complex behaviors performed during sleep. Imagine waking up in the middle of the night to find your roommate rearranging furniture or your partner cooking a complete meal in the kitchen, all while fast asleep.
I can also attest to this.
It's crazy, right?
But I can attest to this. I've done that here since I've been in this place.
Oh, wow.
I woke up in the closet once. Shut up. Shut up.
I don't...
Oh, Mike.
You've been out of the closet for a long time.
I
Matthew.
know. There I am back in the closet. It was quite distressing. I've also peed in weird places.
Me too.
I also once, when I was in my late teens, I walked into the kitchen. My father was getting a jug of milk. It's in Ontario, so you have the bags and the jugs, right?
Yep.
And I walked up to him and said, "You can't have that," and smashed the milk out of his hand, and it was all over the floor.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
I'm still thinking about you in the closet.
There's not enough room in that closet for this personality, I can
You're
tell
in
you that
there
much.
with Tom Cruise and John Travolta.
Hey, Tom. Hey, John.
Somnambulism blurs the lines between wakefulness and slumber. It occurs during the sleep stages of non-rapid eye movement, NREM sleep, typically within the first third of the night. Sleepwalkers may sit up, walk around, or even perform complex tasks like driving a car, all while their conscious mind remains in a dreamlike state. The phenomenon of sleepwalking has captivated human imagination for centuries, inspiring countless stories and myths. However, the reality of somnambulism is often more mundane and sometimes more bizarre than fiction. One of the most intriguing aspects of somnambulism is the disconnect between the sleepwalker's actions and their awareness. While their eyes may be open, sleepwalkers typically have a glazed expression and dilated pupils. They may respond to questions or engage in conversations, but their speech is often nonsensical or unrelated to their surroundings. Upon waking, most sleepwalkers have little to no memory of their nocturnal adventures. Somnambulism isn't just a quirky sleep behavior, it can have serious consequences. Sleepwalkers may injure themselves by tripping or falling, and in rare cases they might even engage in dangerous activities like driving, and unintentional harm to others, like in the case of Kenneth Parks. While somnambulism is more common in children, affecting up to 29% of kids at some point in their lives, it can persist into adulthood for some individuals. The exact causes of sleepwalking remain a mystery, but researchers have identified several potential triggers, including genetics, sleep deprivation, stress, and certain medications. Despite its potential dangers, somnambulism often doesn't require active treatment, especially in children who typically outgrow the behavior. However, for those who experience frequent or disruptive episodes, various treatment options are available, ranging from improved sleep hygiene to medication in severe cases. In episode 115 of Dark Poutine, we covered this landmark case of Kenneth Parks, who during a bout of somnambulism killed his mother-in-law. I've always wanted to retell this story, as I've learned so much more about parasomnias and other sleep disturbances since I wrote and researched that episode. To recap, this extraordinary tale unfolded in the suburbs of Toronto in 1987, and it continues to captivate the minds of legal experts, medical professionals, and the general public alike. Kenneth Parks was a 23-year-old man living in Pickering, Ontario, with his wife and infant daughter. On the surface, he appeared to be a typical young father working in the electronics trade and navigating the challenges of early adulthood. However, beneath the facade, Parks was grappling with a gambling addiction that had spiraled out of control, leading him down a path of financial ruin and deceit. Parks's childhood was marked by instability. His father abandoned the family when he was just 4, leaving him with a distant and difficult relationship with both his stepfather and his biological father. As a teenager, Ken Parks chose to live with his grandparents to maintain continuity in his education when his mother and stepfather decided to move. This decision would prove significant in shaping his future relationships. At the age of 21, Ken married and soon became a father. Interestingly, he developed a particularly close bond with his in-laws, especially his mother-in-law, who affectionately called him her gentle giant. This relationship would make the events that followed all the more shocking and incomprehensible. The summer before the tragic event, Parks' life took a dark turn. What began as an innocent day at the races with friends quickly evolved into a full-blown gambling addiction. Within a mere 5 weeks, Ken went from placing small bets on thoroughbreds to wagering hundreds of dollars on trotters. He first dipped into his family savings to cover his mounting losses before resorting to embezzlement at work.
Oof.
Yeah.
Mike, I don't gamble.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I buy lottery tickets,
Yeah.
which is a form of gambling, but it's just a weekly, I don't go crazy, right? And I buy hospital lottery tickets because I also like the idea that I'm supporting the Children's Hospital or the Vancouver Hospital.
Yeah,
right?
I do those too.
But I don't gamble because I've known family members who had this problem, and who knows, maybe it passes down through the blood, I'm not sure.
Well, you're talking to a guy who had a problem with gambling, the video lottery machines.
Really?
Oh, yeah. I got into trouble, actually.
Oh, dude,
Mhm.
Mike.
I don't gamble anymore.
No, and I've never done it, and because I was just so aware because of others that I've known, just so aware of it. Sometimes people who are a bad example can actually teach you something before you do it yourself.
Yep.
Right?
I was in the middle of other addictions at the time, so it just kind of all went hand in hand for me.
And it's probably a good thing that I didn't do it because I live beside the casino.
Oh, dear.
Mike, literally the casino, if you go kitty corner from
I know.
my one building, it's right there.
The stress of hiding his addiction and financial troubles from his wife took a severe toll on their marriage. Parks found himself caught in a web of lies, struggling to maintain appearances at home and at work. The pressure began to manifest physically, causing sleep disturbances and headaches. Parks developed a delayed sleep phase pattern, often not falling asleep until the early hours of the morning. In March 1987, Parks's embezzlement was discovered, leading to his termination from work and theft charges. Although his employer did not intend to pursue criminal charges, the revelation sent shockwaves through Parks's life. The family's house was put up for sale to cover the debt, and Parks found himself withdrawing from his in-laws out of embarrassment and guilt. Despite a brief attempt to quit gambling, Parks soon relapsed. His situation grew increasingly desperate as he forged his wife's signature to obtain funds. On May 20th, 1987, Ken Parks went to his first meeting of a self-help group that deals with gambling, a step that seemed to indicate a desire to confront his problems. Plans were made to confess his gambling addiction and financial troubles to both his grandmother and his in-laws over the upcoming weekend. The night of May 27, 1987, would prove to be a turning point in Ken Parks' life. He spent the day playing rugby with friends, suffering a mild blow to his temple during the game. That evening, after putting his daughter to bed, he and his wife watched Saturday Night Live. Dennis Hopper was the host, and Roy Orbison was the musical guest performing his hits Crying, Oh Pretty Woman, and In Dreams. Ken Parks fell asleep on the couch around 1:30 a.m. What happened next would become the subject of intense scrutiny and debate. Parks claims that his next memory after falling asleep was of looking down at his mother-in-law's face, her eyes and mouth open with a frightened expression. In the meantime, Parks had apparently driven 23 kilometers to his in-law's home, entered the house, attacked his father-in-law, Dennis Woods, and brutally stabbed his mother-in-law, Barbara Woods, to death. Parks's recollection of the events following this moment was patchy at best. He remembered hearing his in-laws' younger children yelling upstairs, attempting to reassure them, and then finding himself in his car with a knife in his hands. In a daze, he drove to a nearby police station where he uttered the chilling words, quote, "I think I have killed some people. My hands," end quote. It was only at this point that Parks became aware of the severe injuries to his hands, which included multiple severed flexor tendons. The police investigation revealed a horrifying scene at the in-laws' home. Barbara Woods had been stabbed 5 times in the chest and neck and beaten with a blunt instrument, fracturing her skull. Dennis had been strangled unconscious but survived the attack. The family was horrified. How could Ken have done such a thing? As the legal process began, medical professionals were called to assess Ken Parks' mental state and determine what could have led to such a violent act from a man with no history of aggression. The initial psychiatric assessment diagnosed Parks with pathological gambling, psychogenic amnesia, and depression, but found no evidence of psychosis. Further medical investigations were conducted to explore various possibilities, including an acute psychotic episode, drug-related aggression, volitional homicide with stress-induced amnesia, and complex partial epileptic seizures. However, these potential explanations were systematically ruled out through extensive testing and examinations. Multiple psychiatrists evaluated Parks, all finding evidence of depression and anxiety, but no signs of dissociative features, thought disorders, delusions, hallucinations, or other indications of psychosis. There was no history of problems with controlling aggression or any psychiatric dissociative states. Psychological assessments revealed a man in deep emotional turmoil, bewildered and anxious about his situation. Tests showed extremely high levels of depression and hopelessness consistent with an acute state of emotional distress. Parks's personality profile indicated feelings of inadequacy, incompetence, and a tendency toward social isolation and withdrawal. As the investigation progressed, attention turned to the possibility of a sleep disorder being involved in the incident. Parks had a history of sleepwalking, sleep-talking, and bedwetting as a child, and was known to be a very deep sleeper who was difficult to awaken. His family history revealed a high frequency of various parasomnias, including sleepwalking, sleep-talking, enuresis, bedwetting, and night terrors. 2 overnight polysomnograms were conducted while Parks was in detention. These sleep studies revealed some abnormalities in his sleep architecture, including high amounts of slow-wave sleep, including stage shifts and direct transitions from slow-wave sleep to full wakefulness. However, no evidence of other sleep disorders such as sleep apnea, periodic leg movements, or REM sleep behavior disorder was found. Based on the absence of any apparent motive, the lack of evidence for other medical causes, and the strong lab evidence supporting somnambulism, the medical team concluded that the assault and homicide most likely occurred during an episode of sleepwalking. His legal defense argued that Ken Parks had committed homicide during a state of non-insane automatism as part of a presumed episode of somnambulism. They contended that Ken Parks did not have any pre-existing disease of the mind within the meaning of the Canadian Criminal Code, and that the combination of factors that led to this incident was extremely unlikely to occur again. On May 25, 1988, after careful consideration of the evidence presented, the jury rendered a verdict of not guilty. Parks was also subsequently acquitted of the attempted murder of his father-in-law. The Crown Attorney appealed the trial judge's determination that somnambulism was a form of non-insane automatism to both the Court of Appeal and the Supreme Court of Canada. In a testament to the complexity and significance of the case, both appellate courts upheld the original decision. The Kenneth Parks case has become a landmark in legal and medical circles, challenging our understanding of criminal responsibility and the complexities of human consciousness. It raises profound questions about the nature of sleep, the potential for violence during sleep states, and the legal concept of automatism. Following his acquittal, Ken Parks underwent psychotherapy to help him adjust to his new life and continued to take benzodiazepine medication at bedtime. Follow-up sleep studies showed some changes in his sleep patterns likely due to the long-term use of benzodiazepines. Importantly, no further incidents of sleepwalking or violence either during the day or night have been reported. The Kenneth Parks case continues to be studied and debated in legal, medical, and scientific circles. It highlights the intricate relationship between sleep, consciousness, and behavior and underscores the challenges in determining criminal responsibility in cases involving sleep disorders. This case also brings attention to the potential dangers of unrelated or undiagnosed sleep disorders. While extreme violence during sleepwalking is exceedingly rare, the Parks case serves as a stark reminder of the importance of addressing sleep issues and seeking professional help when needed. I have sleep issues too, so I went and got help. Now I use a CPAP machine. I sleep way better. Moreover, the case sheds light on the devastating effects of gambling addiction. Parks's descent into compulsive gambling led to a cascade of poor decisions and deceptions that ultimately contributed to the tragic events of that fateful night. It underscores the need for early intervention and support for individuals struggling with addiction. The Kenneth Parks case also raises important questions about the nature of consciousness and free will. If a person can commit such a violent act while ostensibly asleep, what does this say about our understanding of consciousness and intentionality? These philosophical questions continue to challenge our notions of self and agency. From a legal perspective, the case has had far-reaching implications. It's influenced how courts handle cases involving automatism and contributed to ongoing debates about criminal responsibility in mental states. The decision to classify sleepwalking as a form of non-insane automatism has set a precedent that continues to be discussed and sometimes contested in legal circles. The case also highlights the crucial role of expert testimony in complex legal proceedings. The detailed sleep studies, psychiatric evaluations, and expert interpretations were pivotal in the jury's decision. This brings to the fore the importance of bridging the gap between scientific knowledge and legal decision-making. I kind of like those two things together.
Yeah. From a legal perspective, I find this case fascinating because it forces sometimes when we do these stories, I'd sort of take myself out and it's just interesting to look at the justice system and how it works, right? Mm-hmm. with of course, it's all a tragedy, but you can elevate up and just look at the justice system sometimes. And what I find fascinating about this is it forces the system to reckon with the question, what does it mean to be responsible for your actions? And that's always the really tricky bits in justice, isn't it?
Well, it can be, yeah.
Yeah, it can be, right?
Sometimes it's very clear, but other times, like at this particular case.
That's what I'm talking about when it's not clear, like just from a legal perspective, it's fascinating how they get there and how they figure it out, right? Because the law hinges on intent, but sleepwalking obliterates that concept. And Parks' case really set a precedent, but it also opened up Pandora's box, right? Like you're going to talk about other cases. If sleep can be a defense, where do we draw the line?
Exactly.
Right? And how do we separate genuine cases of parasomnia from convenient legal arguments? Because we know that insanity is is often used when it's so obvious that it's not, right?
Right. In the field of sleep medicine, the Kenneth Parks case has been instrumental in advancing research and understanding of parasomnias. It has spurred further studies into the potential for complex behaviors during sleep states and has contributed to developing more sophisticated diagnostic and monitoring techniques for sleep disorders. As far as I know, Kenneth Parks has not spoken publicly about the case. However, in 2006, nearly 20 years after the incident, Parks ran for school trustee in Durham. This suggests that he had moved on with his life to some extent, but articles do not mention any public statements from Parks about his condition or the case.
Yeah. I mean, I think in this case, I do think it was sleep, right? I actually agree with the courts.
There's so much science behind.
Hard as it is, and as sad as I feel for the victims, family, right?
Yeah.
But this man must have there's an extremely high personal cost to him for this as well.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Imagine waking up one day and learn you've killed someone you've loved. Like literally you wake up while you're doing it, right?
Well, you killed your mother-in-law.
Yeah.
So your wife and you have to deal with that as well.
Yeah.
And your kids and
I love my mother-in-law, right?
Yeah.
it's though all the mother-in-law jokes, often mother-in-laws are great. In my case she is, and
mine was. Yep.
And he was acquitted, but he wasn't absolved, right? Like no court ruling can change the reality of what happened that night. And I must imagine his feelings of personal guilt or at least grief didn't vanish with the verdict, right?
No,
it can, and it must have been hard to get on with his life, and the same for the people who loved him and Barbara, right?
Definitely. After the break, as well as several others, we'll look at another lesser-known Canadian case where somnambulism was used as a defense. The alleged attempted murder of Hugh Heglin by Clayton John Vickberg in Victoria, BC in 1996. And we are back. Matthew, thoughts on this stuff so far?
For somebody who who sleepwalks, and who has years ago sleep sexed, I find this really chilling. The idea that someone can commit murder without intent, it forces us to confront some really uncomfortable truths about our own autonomy, if you think about it. It's like we believe we're in control of our actions, right? But this case puts cracks in that assumption, and I think the science has proven that homicidal somnambulism is real. Somnambulism. They have to find a better word. Okay,
right. Sleepwalking.
The sex one is sleep sex. By accepting that scientific fact, we're accepting something dark, and that's that we're not entirely in control of ourselves or safe from ourselves.
Yeah.
And that totally, I was reading this, freaked out when you sent me this script.
Well, it is freaky. And this is why I wanted to retell this story, because the first time I told this particular story, I don't feel like I addressed it well enough. And so that's why I revisit stories.
Was that before me?
Yes.
Because I used to listen to the show before I started on the show. I heard you. I heard you have a great new co-host.
Yeah.
But I've never heard him.
Okay, moving on. Oh boy. I have a personal history of intermittent sleepwalking out into the living room near my bedroom when I was a kid, and I had unremembered conversations with Mom and Dad. I've peed in inappropriate places, including the bathtub and a low windowsill. My parents reported me sitting up dead asleep in our shared hotel room at one point, yelling out, quote, "They're going to get us," and then laying right back down to sleep. In 2018, I went through some serious issues with problems related to sleep. I began doing weird things in my sleep. My dreams were vivid and strange. I would laugh loudly or have bizarre one-sided conversations with unseen people, sometimes flailing my arms at something in my dream. My ex-wife Carol informed me of these episodes if they didn't wake me, which they frequently did. I would come to reaching for something that wasn't there. I fell asleep during the day when sitting down and sometimes began nodding off when driving long distances. That ain't good. I went to the doctor and got a referral to a sleep clinic. I spent the night there, wired to various sensors and machines. I was having sleep apnea events at least 100 times per hour, which I'm told was extreme. I was prescribed a CPAP machine that I have been using ever since. I'm grateful I never hurt anyone, but having had my experiences, I can see how it's possible. For centuries, the defense of sleepwalking has been, often unsuccessfully, attempted as a defense for various crimes. It was not until Kenneth Parks' case that the science had caught up to the point where, when it is warranted, it can be successfully employed. Lady Macbeth was said to be sleepwalking when she gave her famous speech in Act 5, Scene 1 of the Scottish play, when she cried out, sleepwalking and guiltily dreaming of blood on her hands, "Out, damned spot! Out, I say!"
And then 1, 2, why then, 'tis time to do it. Hell is murky. I love the Scottish play.
Yeah, me too. And for those who don't understand the reason it's called the Scottish play, because you never invoke that name because it's cursed.
It's gonna jinx it. If you're doing the play, you can't like we can say it, but if you're doing the play, you can't say it because it's gonna jinx the play.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
A 1988 Ottawa Citizen article about the Parks case brilliantly quoted the Robert Palmer hit Addicted to Love, quote, "Your lights are on, but you're not home. Your will is not your own," end quote. So it sort of speaks to what you were talking about after the break there, Matt.
Something about sweat. I'm going to have the song in my head all day now, Mike.
Yes, I'm not sorry.
Do you remember the Robert Palmer girls?
I absolutely do.
How that was like such a big thing. The slick back hair, the mini skirts, the lipstick.
Black miniskirt, black stockings, and
that 80s
white
slick back
shirt.
hair.
Yep.
Yeah. Do you remember before they changed their dress code, Earl's restaurant?
Yeah.
Justin and I would go and like laugh that all the waitresses were Robert Palmer girls because they had a dress code that made them all look like Robert Palmer girls. They're all in like short black dresses, high heels. They all had slick back hair and red lipstick. And we're like, wow, we're going back to the 80s.
Yeah. Kenneth Parks' case was not the first successful use of somnambulism as a defense. The landmark 1846 case, Massachusetts versus Terrell, was the first documented instance where sleepwalking was successfully used as a defense against murder charges. The tale begins with Maria Bickford, a captivating beauty who plied her trade in a Boston brothel, catering to the city's wealthy elite. Among her patrons was Albert Terrell, a married man and father from Weymouth who had abandoned his family to be closer to Maria. Their relationship was tumultuous, with Terrell reportedly urging Maria to leave her profession, a request she steadfastly refused in her pursuit of independence. On the fateful night of October 27, 1845, tragedy struck. Terrell allegedly visited Bickford's bedroom and committed a gruesome act, slashing her throat so severely she was nearly decapitated. In an apparent attempt to cover his tracks, he set 3 fires in the brothel before fleeing the scene. While several witnesses placed Terrell at the location, none could testify to witnessing the actual murder. Terrell's subsequent flight to New Orleans and eventual capture only added to the drama of the case. When brought to trial in Boston, his defense team, led by one of the era's most prominent attorneys, presented a bold and unprecedented strategy. They argued that Terrell was a chronic sleepwalker who may have committed the heinous act while in the grip of a nightmare or a trance.
You were laughing at me earlier when we were going through this because I've totally geeked out on how he got from Boston to New Orleans in the 1845.
Yeah.
So I find it I find it fascinating how people were tracked down back then. Like it's just I can never get over, right? Boston to New York in a straight line is 2,400 kilometers, right? That's
quite a trek in the 1800s.
It's a trek now, let alone the 1800s. But back then, so I geeked out, did the research. If he took a train from Boston to New York, then a coastal steamer down the coast to Charleston or Savannah, then another steamboat along rivers and the Gulf of Mexico coast to New Orleans, it would have taken 10 to 14 days.
The Gulf of Mexico, yeah.
Yeah. If he took an overland stagecoach, it'd be 4 to 6 weeks. And if he did ship around Florida, it'd be 3 to 4 weeks. So
So Florida into the Gulf of Mexico and then to New Orleans.
Yeah, which is a long way around, right?
It really is.
And so, I think he was on the run and he had money, so he probably did the fast route, right? So let's say it took him, 10 to 14 days.
Yep.
So think about this, okay? He's that far away, 10 to 14 days at this fastest speed. There are no national databases, there are no computers. In fact, there are no telephones, and the telegraph was just being invented in its infancy.
Right.
There was nothing. Right? It was, they would have had to
like ask people, did you see this guy?
That's how it happened.
Yep.
Right? So wanted notice, newspaper alerts, word of mouth, surveillance at travel hubs. But even surveillance at travel hubs, you have to get ahead of the guy to do it, right?
Yep.
I was kind of hoping that the Pinkertons got him. I'm fascinated with Pinkerton Detective Agency, but they weren't around until 1850.
There you go.
Anyway, I'll stop geeking now.
Terrell's lawyer wove a compelling narrative in an age when medical understanding of sleep disorders was virtually non-existent. He presented extensive testimony from family members and acquaintances detailing Terrell's history of sleepwalking. Through vivid descriptions of violence attributed to somnambulism, the defense successfully planted seeds of doubt in the jurors' minds. On March 30th, 1846, after less than 2 hours of deliberation, the jury returned a verdict, not guilty. Terrell walked free. However, viewed through the lens of modern medical knowledge, the outcome of Massachusetts versus Terrell raises eyebrows. Today's understanding of parasomnia suggests that Terrell's actions, particularly setting fires to cover up the crime, fleeing the scene, and going into hiding, are inconsistent with genuine sleepwalking behavior. Geez, do you think? The verdict might differ in a contemporary courtroom armed with current scientific insights
and common sense. I have a sneaking suspicion that he was wide awake when he did this.
No, yeah, your sneaking suspicion is probably correct. Not every use of somnambulism as a defense in criminal proceedings has resulted in acquittal. In 1993, 2 significant cases highlighted the challenges of using sleep-related defenses. In Pennsylvania, Michael Rixgers was convicted and sentenced to life in prison without parole for killing his wife despite claiming he was dreaming about an intruder when he fired the gun that killed her. Although Rixgers presented a clinical history of severe obstructive sleep apnea, the prosecution's argument that he was upset about his wife planning to leave him proved more convincing to the jury. That same year in Indiana, a man named David M. McLean's attempt to use sleep deprivation as a defense failed when the court classified his automatism evidence as a mental disease or defect. McLean was alleged to have struck several police officers while being subdued. On December 22, 1993, McLean was charged with aggravated battery, 2 counts of battery against police officers, and 2 counts of resisting law enforcement. His defense had withdrawn his insanity defense before the trial, which prevented him from presenting sleep deprivation evidence, leading to his conviction on all the charges. The late 1990s and early 2000s saw more high-profile cases where sleepwalking defenses were rejected. In 1999, Scott Fallader was convicted of first-degree murder in Arizona despite claiming a sleepwalking defense. Fallader had stabbed his wife 44 times and drowned her in their swimming pool. His conviction was based on a neighbor's testimony of witnessing seemingly conscious actions, evidence of Fallader hiding incriminating items, and the complex nature of his actions which were inconsistent with typical sleepwalking behavior. The following year, in 2000, a man named Clayton was convicted in a U.S. federal court despite having significant history of sleepwalking behaviors. The prosecution acknowledged his sleepwalking history, but his conviction was based on the nature of his attack, which involved chasing the victim and using a hammer, as well as Clayton's history of domestic violence while awake, suggesting the violent behavior was not out of character. In the mid-2000s, 2 more cases further illustrated the difficulties in successfully employing a sleepwalking defense. In 2004, Stephen Otto Reitz was convicted in California and sentenced to 26 years to life for killing his girlfriend. His sleepwalking defense failed despite having a history of sleepwalking and undergoing sleep clinic tests that revealed a propensity to sleepwalk and experience night terrors. The conviction was later upheld on appeal. The following year, in Dorset, England, Michael Catling's attempt to use automatism due to sleepwalking as a defense was unsuccessful. He was convicted of murder and jailed for life. Expert investigation discredited his sleepwalking claim and the brutal nature of that crime, which involved cutting the victim's throat and multiple stabbings, along with his actions after the crime, including fleeing the scene and initially claiming someone else had attacked the victim, which contributed to the failure of his defense. These cases demonstrate that while sleepwalking can sometimes be used successfully as a defense, courts often reject such claims, especially when the actions involved are complex, violent, or inconsistent with typical sleepwalking behavior. The burden of proof remains high for defendants attempting to use somnambulism as a defense, and the success of such claims often depends on the specific circumstances of each case, the strength of evidence presented, and the ability to convince the court that the criminal actions were truly committed while in a state of automatism. Another Canadian case, the case of R. versus Vickberg, heard in 1998 by the Supreme Court of British Columbia, presents a complex legal scenario involving criminal responsibility, intoxication, and automatism. While it's not exactly somnambulism, it does bring into question whether or not Vickberg was aware of what he was doing while he did it. On February 1st, 1996, Clayton John Vickberg was charged with attempted murder and assault with a weapon after stabbing Hugh Heglin multiple times in Heglin's apartment. The case hinged on whether Vickberg was in a state of automatism due to extreme intoxication from prescription drugs at the time of the attack. The events leading up to the incident paint a picture of a man struggling with addiction and seeking help. Vickberg, a heroin addict, had consulted Dr. Rockerby on January 30th, 1996 in an attempt to combat his addiction. Dr. Rockerby prescribed him 60 clonidine tablets and 20 Imovane tablets. Clonidine is used for hypertension, ADHD, and insomnia, particularly in patients with chronic pain or anxiety. It reduces norepinephrine activity in the brain, promoting sedation and better sleep quality. Common side effects include dry mouth, dizziness, and low blood pressure. Imovane, zopiclone, is a sedative hypnotic prescribed for short-term insomnia management. It enhances the ability to sleep but can cause drowsiness, confusion, and dependency with prolonged use. Withdrawal symptoms and adverse effects like nightmares are common. Clonidine is often considered safer for long-term use, especially in chronic pain patients, while Imovane is effective but carries a higher risk of dependency and side effects. Vickberg's clonidine container was labeled with instructions to take 1 or 2 tablets 3 times a day as needed, while the Imovane was to be taken at bedtime. There was no evidence that Vickberg received any warnings about potential side effects or dangers of these medications. On the morning of February 1st, 1996, Vickberg, feeling depressed and experiencing heroin withdrawal symptoms, began taking the prescribed medications. He initially took 3 or 4 clonidine tablets, then a few more as his withdrawal symptoms intensified. Vickberg's last clear memory was of feeling lightheaded while catching a bus. He has no recollection of taking any further pills or of the events that followed. At around 11:30 a.m., Vickberg entered Hugh Heglin's apartment. Heglin, who knew Vickberg as a friend, invited him in. Without warning or apparent motive, Vickberg suddenly attacked Hugh Heglin, stabbing him multiple times while saying, "You are going to die." Hugh Heglin managed to fight back, breaking the knife and eventually subduing Vickberg. During the struggle, Vickberg also hit Heglin several times, and Hugh noted that Vickberg seemed to be in a trance-like state, not responding to anything Heglin said and appearing not to recognize him. After the attack, Vickberg fled the scene and stole a car belonging to Suzanne Combe, a neighbor. Combe observed Vickberg in a trance-like state, unresponsive to her calls as he drove away. Shortly after, Vickberg crashed the stolen car on the Island Highway. When police arrived at the crash site, they found Vickberg semi-conscious and moaning. At the hospital, it was discovered that Vickberg had consumed approximately 60 clonidine tablets and 20 Imovane tablets. The primary diagnosis was an overdose of these prescription medications coupled with a closed head injury from the car accident. Notably, there was no evidence of recent heroin use by Vickberg. The legal issues in this case centered around whether Vickberg was in a state of non-insane automatism at the time of the attack, and if so, whether this state was brought about by voluntary or involuntary intoxication. The defense argued that Vickberg's consumption of the prescription drugs had led to a dissociative state akin to automatism, rendering him unaware of his actions and unable to form the necessary intent for the crimes charged. Justice Owen Flood carefully considered the evidence, including expert testimony from John Lorasby, a forensic psychiatrist. Dr. Lorasby opined that Vickberg was indeed in a dissociative state at the time of the attack, brought about by the overconsumption of prescription medications. He emphasized that once impaired by the drugs like clonidine and Imovane, a person may be unaware of further consumption, explaining how Vickberg could have ingested such a large quantity. The judge concluded that Vickberg was in a state of non-insane automatism during the attack, induced by the involuntary overconsumption of prescription drugs. Justice Owen Flood found that Vickberg did not intend to become extremely intoxicated and was unaware of the potential effects of the medications. As a result, Vickberg was acquitted of all charges. The judge also considered the application of Section 33.1 of the Criminal Code, which limits the use of extreme intoxication as a defense for violent crimes. However, he ruled that it did not apply in this case, as Vickberg's intoxication was not clearly, quote, self-induced as required by the law. Nevertheless, the judge upheld the constitutionality of Section 33.1 for future cases, finding that although it violates Sections 7 and 11d of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, it can be saved under Section 1 as a reasonable limit in a free and democratic society. So to break that all down,
please.
Yeah, if you get yourself drunk or stoned and then commit murder, you cannot use that as a defense. But in this case, because Vickberg seemed to be taking the drugs as prescribed, but they affected him poorly, and in a state of dissociative automatism, he took the rest of the pills and ended up stabbing Hugh Heglin.
Yeah. One thing I know from having friends that were addicts and knowing people that were is there's a fact that an addict can't be trusted when they're asked how much they're taking or how often.
I know, I could not.
It is a part of the nature of addiction to downplay how much you're doing.
Right.
And he was popping those pills, more of them than he was supposed to at the beginning. In the morning, what you said, like I was counting, he did about 6 in that morning, right?
Yeah.
And so then, but I still question, I all we have is an addict's word that he, quote, can't remember taking more.
Yeah.
And I find that flimsy. But it doesn't matter because the jury bought it. I don't think I do. And he was acquitted, right?
Yeah.
But I do also wonder what Hughes' loved ones think of the result of this. The fact that someone addicted to heroin went free because he, quote, involuntarily consumed other drugs. If I can tell you, Mike, if this was you that was killed or my husband, well, I'll put my husband first. My husband or you or family members, I would definitely feel that justice wasn't done, my friend.
Yeah. Well, so this one is a bit, and this is why I included it, because it's a bit interesting and a rather mildly controversial for those reasons that you just stated. So
I think it's I don't know truth. I'm not saying I know the truth, but this all feels flimsy to me. Mm-hmm. And when you're dealing with the fact that somebody was murdered, I just, it's sad. I find this sad.
Yeah. According to his obituary, Hugh Heglin passed away September 20th, 2006. He left behind his wife Mary, 4 children, Linda, Rick, Cheryl, and Kevin, and 8 grandchildren. He was well known for charter fishing with his boat, the Tuggy. He had made many friends through his work. These cases of automatistic violence, in particular those of Kenneth Parks and Clayton John Vickberg, challenge our understanding of consciousness, free will, and criminal responsibility. While the legal system has grappled with these complex issues, the true nature of sleep-related violence remains a subject of intense debate among medical professionals, legal experts, and ethicists alike. As we've seen, the line between sleep and wakefulness can be frighteningly blurred, leaving us to wonder how much control do we really have over our actions when we're in the grip of a deep sleep or under the influence of a drug we didn't mean to take. This episode serves as a chilling reminder that even in its most vulnerable state, the human mind can be capable of shocking acts. As we turn off the lights tonight, we might ponder, how well do we know ourselves in the dark? And that's it for Dark Poutine episode 355, Homicidal Somnambulism. Are you a murderer if you kill in your sleep?
That's right. It's time for voicemails. You can leave us a message at 1-877-327-5786 or 1-877-DARK-PTN. We'd love to hear from you. Let's see who called us this week.
Our first voicemail was a little muddled, but I do have the text because the software that I use transcribes our voicemails for us.
Look at you being all futuristic and shit.
Well, I don't know. I just fluked into this one. So the voicemail goes, "Hi, it's Elizabeth from Liverpool, just down the road from Bridgewater. I'm calling with a little bit of appreciation for you lads. It is really painful to listen to Americans or Europeans talk about the crimes happening in Canada. They do not understand our provinces. They get all the names mispronounced. I had to endure mispronunciation. Anyway, she goes on to delete an episode of a podcast, and she said she's just calling to say thank you for being Canadian. Not.
You'll notice, Elizabeth, you'll notice in this episode we didn't mispronounce the Gulf of Mexico.
Yeah, right. Anyway, but somebody else just messaged me the other day and said, you mispronounced the name of this thing. And I said, well, you know what? I wear that as a badge of honor. I mispronounce all kinds of words. There's this thing called regional pronunciation. And if you're not from the region, you may not pronounce it that way. Just because the people in the region pronounce it that way doesn't necessarily mean it's the right way.
I agree with you, Mick.
Okay. Thank you, Matthew.
I'm not in the, where do you live again?
Langley.
I'm not in the Langley region, so I'm going to call you Mick. I thought you lived in that other place.
Abbotsford?
Yeah.
No. That's it for this week's voicemails. Again, you can leave us one at 1-877-327-5786 or 1-877-DARK-PTN. We'd love to hear from you, even if it is just to say hi and to tell us to go shit in our hats. If you're stumped for what to chat with us about, a quick story is welcome. Alrighty, it's on to Donut Money donors and Patreon. And we actually missed a PayPal Donut Money donor back in December when we were off. Oopsie. So that it makes sense that we might have missed a couple. Mm. And this person's name is Leslie, and she is from, here's going to be a mispronunciation, Pekin, Illinois, or Pekin, Illinois. It's Pekin, Illinois. Huh. So, and she says she sent Donut Money on December 17th, but she hasn't heard an acknowledgement. Oh, well, this is your acknowledgement.
I think that was my fault.
Leslie, why? Why was that your fault? You don't get those emails.
Yeah, I know, but I just feel responsible for that.
You should be.
I wonder if they make pecan pie in Illinois. And
pecan? Oh, yeah, there's another thing. There's another regional pronunciation. In Dallas, I was told you call it a pecan. You don't call it a pecan.
Okay, interesting.
It's a pecan. It's pecan pie.
Pecan. So maybe Leslie is from Pecan, Illinois.
Maybe, I don't know. What does she do there in Illinois? How much do you want to bet she's a baker of pies?
No. She's
okay.
Yeah, no, she teaches history.
Teaches history, okay.
Yeah.
Does she have a particular focus?
All of it.
All of the history.
Leslie literally knows everything that's ever happened everywhere.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, could you imagine if you had a history teacher that literally knew exactly what happened in all time? That would be incredible.
Well, my favorite history teacher, his name was John Derrick, and he was a British guy. And
did you think he knew everything?
No, he was fantastic. He was one of those guys who used to, everybody loved him. He used to have attendance tests when it was summer, and he would say, if you're here, you get 100%. If you haven't skipped my class. So he would, call your name and you would say present.
Did your teachers ever, like on a summer day, did you ever have a teacher go, we're going to have a class outside today?
Well, he would actually let us go sometimes.
Okay. But did you ever have, you sit around a circle on the grass? And we used to do that occasionally.
Yeah, a couple of times. But yeah, John Derrick was great. Anyway,
thank you, Leslie.
Thank you, Leslie. I need to look up.
Leslie, the Oracle.
The Oracle?
Yeah. She knows everything, she's the Oracle, isn't she?
Well, oracles know way more than just history, though, don't they?
They know the future.
They do?
Yeah.
Thanks to all our patrons and Donut Money donors, past and present, for your generosity. It helps to keep the show going. You can become a patron of Dark Poutine at patreon.com/darkpoutine. For a one-time donation, you can send us donut money via PayPal or interact using our email address, darkpoutinepodcast@gmail.com. If you don't already subscribe to the show, it would mean a lot if you did. You can easily find Dark Poutine on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows. If you haven't gotten yours yet, my 2 books are available to order via links on the Dark Poutine website or anywhere fine books are sold. And speaking of darkpoutine.com, check it out for show notes and other cool stuff. We'd appreciate it if you gave Dark Poutine a like or a follow on Facebook and Instagram. Most importantly, thank you for listening. Tell your friends about us. Word of mouth is a powerful thing. And that's it for this episode of Dark Poutine. So until next time, don't forget to be a good egg and not a bad apple.
Bye, everyone.